Welcome back, everybody, to Islands Uncovered. My name is Megan. I'm the owner of Dare to Dream Travel, and I'm a travel advisor who exclusively books Sandals and Beaches properties. So today we are going to start with our basic resort overview, updates on what's happening, and the promos. Obviously, there is a lot going on with Hurricane Melissa blowing through Jamaica. But thankfully, we have received word last week that everybody is safe. Nobody at the resorts got injured, which is fantastic news. And then a couple days ago, they just announced all of the resort opening dates. So some areas of Jamaica got hit harder than others, but the Ocho Rios and Negril area, that is going to be ready to welcome visitors back to Sandals and Beaches on December 6th. So in about a month, which is fantastic. And those resorts include Sandals Negril and Beaches Negril, and then Sandals Royal Plantation, Sandals Ochi, and Sandals Duns River. So if you have trips planned after December 6th, feel free to keep those reservations. I know that Sandals is currently still offering to refund or reschedule any of those resorts through the end of December, just in case travel during that time makes you still feel uncomfortable. But I would encourage you to still go. And then the resorts that got hit a little harder, that's going to include Sandals South Coast, one of my favorite resorts in Jamaica, and then Sandals Montego Bay and Sandals Royal Caribbean. Those are going to need a little bit more refresh to get them up and running. And so those opening dates are going to be May 30th of next year. Anybody booked before that, you are going to have to work with your travel advisor or call in to the call center to get those dates rescheduled to a different date further out or at a different resort. Sandals and Beaches has been doing a fantastic job with all of my clients. Every single person I've called, we've been able to reschedule. They have honored the rates that they have. As long as you are moving rooms that are the same, room category, general pricing, even if it's a luxury room to a luxury room and it's slightly more, my clients have been honored their original costs. Even if the time of year is different and generally costs a little bit more, they have been honoring your original rate. So I encourage you to call in, talk to the people in the call center. They are doing the very best they can. Have patience while you are on hold. Just know that they are working really long hours to get everybody taken care of. And one person even said that yesterday they were having some issues with the phone lines because they reached the max capacity of calls that they could possibly take and put on hold. So again, patience. Everybody is doing the very best they can to get a lot of people rescheduled at the same time. So if you are excited to go back to Sandals or Beaches, which who wouldn't be? I'm very excited. I am actually planning to go back to Sandals Duns River in the middle of December, which is a trip that I needed to reschedule due to the hurricane. If you're interested in seeing pictures, videos of what the resort looks like, how it's doing, please follow along on any of my social media platforms. So, Instagram or TikTok, I will be posting videos on there from the resort when I go. Again, that's going to be about the middle of December. So, I encourage you to follow along. But if you are excited to go back, there are still some sales running. So, the Sandals Stay More, Save More sale is actually still running right now. They do keep extending the deadline for that sale. I don't know. I'm not an insider. I don't work for Sandals and Beaches, but I imagine, they've got a lot going on right now. So the new deadline for that sale is November 10th. It's a very easy sale to understand. The longer you stay, the more you're going to save. And then if you stay 7+ nights, you're going to qualify for a free night, as well as at Sandals, a $175 resort credit that can be used at the spa, cabana, gift shop, or at Beaches, it's exclusive to the spa, but it's the same amount, that $175. Please keep in mind that if you're booking this on your own and not through a travel advisor, remember you have to register for that. So that is a different process besides just getting your reservation online. You're going to need to register it. So if you have any questions about that, please reach out. There is a very short window of time that you are able to do that after you make your booking to be able to get that incentive. Like I said, that goes through November 10th. And then we'll see if after that point they extend the sale longer or if they start up a new sale, which I will keep you updated on. And then besides that, I did look at the 777s that came out yesterday. So as a reminder, 777s happen every Wednesday. It is 7 rooms within the Sandals brand and 7 rooms within the Beaches brand that are an additional 7% off. And last week, they did not update these. Again, they've got a lot going on. But this week they did. So there was a brand new set of 7 rooms available at Sandals and Beaches. And they put some rooms and resorts on here that have not been on 777s in a while. So I keep track in a spreadsheet of the 777 rooms. I can see which rooms more consistently go on sale, which rooms are more of a rarity. And so I wanted to mention a few. So they do have a room on there this week, a luxury room category, the Caribbean Honeymoon Walkout from the Grand St. Lucian. They haven't had a room at this resort in quite a while, and this is a luxury room. So it's going to be one of the least expensive room categories. If you're looking to go and experience this resort at a more discounted price, this is going to be a great room to book. So you might want to consider that. Again, these deals are only for new deposits put down through next Tuesday, which is going to be Tuesday, November 11th. And then we have a room at Halcyon. We have a Rendezvous. Those have not been on in a while. Halcyon is again in St. Lucia, very small property. It's nice and quiet, but what's nice is you also can go to the other 2 Sandals properties. If you stay at one of those, you can go to all 3. Then after that, we have Royal Barbados. That has not been on the list in a while either. So the South Seas Crystal Lagoon Club Level Barbados Suite with a balcony, tranquility, soaking tub. These rooms are always a mouthful. But again, Royal Barbados has not had a room in a while. This is that mid-tier club level room. And then finally, they did put a room from Sandals Ochi in Jamaica on the list. Ochi's rooms are typically more discounted in general. This week, they have the Honeymoon Hideaway Luxury Club Level Garden Cottage. They're on the beach side, but they're a little tucked away. They're not going to have ocean views, but there's not many of them. It's a little bit more quiet back there. So there's a lot of people who really love the little garden cottages at Ochi, and they are in 777 this week. So if anybody is looking for a steal at Sandals Ochi, wants to support Jamaica and go back to Ocho Rios, there is a room on 777 this week. Please reach out. And then the other rooms, there's 3 other ones at Curacao, Latok, and Royal Plantation. Those rooms I see a little bit more frequently, so I wanted to highlight the other 4. And then there are 7 rooms at Beaches as well. But because there are only 2 Beaches properties open right now, Beaches Negril and Beaches Turks. So what they've been typically doing and what they have this week is 4 rooms in Negril, 3 rooms in Turks. There's just so many room options at those resorts between 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, concierge, butler, standard. There's not a lot of luxe rooms that typically go on 777 very often. It's mostly concierge and butler, and that's the same for this week as well. But if you have interest in learning more about the rooms that are on 777 at Beaches this week, please reach out to me and I will be happy to provide you with that information. Okay, so that kind of wraps up the resort overview. Again, some of the resorts will be opening in a month on December 6th. The other 3, we've got to wait until May 30th. Super excited to see those. I'm super excited to see South Coast. They were going to do some renovations on that one anyway. They were going to add in a Butch's and a Bloom and I think a Rum Club. So I'm very curious to see if they're taking this time to do that. So I'm super excited to get back. Okay, so moving on to my favorite part of this podcast is where I get to learn something and hopefully you get to learn something. So as I mentioned in the previous episode, I travel down to the Caribbean quite a bit now. And while I'm there, I'm typically staying on the Sandals and Beaches properties, but I wanted to learn more about the islands in general. And this month, because of Hurricane Melissa, we are focusing on Jamaica, but I will be doing segments about all of the other islands that Sandals and Beaches are located on as well. Today, because the Ocho Rios resorts are opening first. I mean, Negril is 2, but there's 3 in Ocho Rios. So I'm going to focus on that. I thought it would be fun to talk a little bit about the history of that area in Jamaica. I've been to Ocho Rios now multiple times and I don't know much about it. So I was very excited to look into this. And I hope you're excited to hear some more about this as well. So that when you go the next time, you know a little bit more about the area of Jamaica that you're going, the history, and the people who live there. So, in particular, we're going to talk about the parish of St. Anne. In Jamaica, there are different parishes, and St. Anne is the parish that is located on the northern side of the island. It's Jamaica's largest parish, and it's where Ocho Rios is. So, again, if you're thinking about Ocho Rios and the Sandals resorts, that's going to be Sandals Duns River, Sandals Ochi, and Sandals Royal Plantation. So, that's where we're going today. Okay, so we're going to start back on May 4th, 1494, where our good friend Christopher Columbus arrives in Jamaica. So he arrived in Jamaica on his second voyage to the Americas, and they believe he arrived in Horseshoe Bay, named because of its shape. That bay was eventually renamed to be called Dry Harbor, which I believe is what the locals call it today, and it's also known as Discovery Bay. But that is where Christopher Columbus was believed to have first arrived. And then about a mile west of that is where the island's first capital was located. So this was the Spanish settlement. It's one of the oldest cities established by the Europeans who came to the Americas, and that is called New Seville. And I'm probably pronouncing that horribly because I did not grow up learning Spanish, but that's going to be how I'm going to pronounce it for the podcast. So Christopher Columbus arrives. The Spaniards, they saw what was there, loved it, left. And then they did eventually come back. So what happened was Christopher Columbus's son, Diego, he heard about Jamaica and how fabulous it was. And so he sent this guy named Juan de Esquivel to establish a Spanish colony. And they estimated that Juan, our buddy Juan now, he's arriving in 1509. And Juan is the guy who set up the capital city, and he constructed a lot of buildings there, like a cathedral and monastery. And he named himself the first Spanish governor of Jamaica. So, he shows up and he just declares himself governor. That sounds about right. So Juan brought with him, he didn't come alone. He brought colonists and livestock because they were coming to set up shop. But what they also brought was disease. And the Arawak people who lived on the land were tasked with helping Juan and his crew with finding gold. And the Arawak people who lived there, it was horrible. They had to do tons of physical labor to search for gold, and they tried to convert everybody to Christianity, forcing their beliefs on these people. And so then it continued to get worse. So by 1513, the Spaniards were then permitted to bring in African slaves, which marked the first Africans arriving in Jamaica. So the Arawaks who lived there originally, they're working. They were getting sick because of all the disease that was coming in from the Spanish, and their numbers were beginning to decline. So the Spaniards thought, well, we need more people to help us dig for gold that we don't even know if it's here or not. So let's bring in some slaves. And so this is what started what's called the triangular slave trade. And I think it's important for us to touch on here of what the triangular slave trade is in case you were never able to learn about that in school. So if you can imagine a triangle, we've got Europe to Africa, Africa to the Americas, which we're going to consider Jamaica for all intents and purposes of this episode, and then the Americas back to Europe. So what was happening was ships left the European ports, and they had textiles and firearms and metal goods, and they went to Africa. And they traded that stuff in Africa for enslaved people, particularly in West Africa. So then the second leg of the triangle was Africa to the Americas, and this was called the Middle Passage, the voyage across the Atlantic. They had the enslaved Africans all crammed into these ships, and they were bringing them to the Americas. Horrible. Many people died on the way over here, obviously not taken very good care of. And then the last leg was the Americas back to Europe. So any of the enslaved people who managed to survive the voyage across the Atlantic were sold to the Americas to work on the plantations, the sugar crops, the tobacco crops, the cotton crops, and the raw materials then that they produced from these crops were shipped back to Europe. So, again, that's the triangle that we're talking about, the textiles going to Africa for the slaves being brought to the Americas for the goods being produced there, and the goods being brought back to Europe. And that all started again around 1513. So Spain remained in control of Jamaica then for another 150 years. And you can still see a lot of their influences in the architecture and many of the Spanish names that are assigned to the rivers and the mountains and the towns. That's where that kind of came from. So then in 1655, the British naval forces came in and they captured Jamaica from the Spanish, and they retained control of Jamaica for the next 300 years. So, again, going back to kind of the slave history here, I think it is super important to touch on this as we're talking. I know we're supposed to be talking about Ocho Rios in general, but this is Ocho Rios in Jamaica because this is the port where so many things were happening. So during the transition period, while Spain and England are fighting for control of Jamaica, what happened is a bunch of the African slaves who were in Jamaica, they thought to themselves, hey, these Spanish people, England's coming in, they're a bit distracted right now. So the African slaves actually took that as their chance to escape into the middle interior part of the island. And if you've ever been to Jamaica, it's very hilly. I don't know if they consider it mountains. Maybe because it's Blue Mountain coffee. I don't know. I don't know the difference between hill and mountain, but it's very hilly, mountainous, green. These slaves, they made a break for it. And they were like, we are getting out of here. And so the escaped slaves created their own culture in the woods in the middle of the island based on their African roots. And once the British gained control of the Jamaica, they were never able to fully recapture all of these slaves. And so finally in 1739, they were granted political autonomy. And unfortunately, the slave trade did not end until 1807. So there were still slaves. There were some slaves that were able to escape, and then obviously others were still being brought in. The slave trade lasted until 1807 in Jamaica, and then emancipation finally being granted in 1838, which was almost 250 years of resistance. So going back to Ocho Rios more specifically, which is a city in St. Anne Parish, the town eventually developed into a fishing port, and it was not long after this that the development of St. Anne's Bay was named the capital town. And St. Anne is still home to several buildings of importance in history. They've got the Bay Parish Church, the Bay Parish Courthouse, the old jailhouse. But in 1872, the capital moved over to Kingston, which is on the south side of Jamaica, and that's where the capital is today. So St. Anne is no longer the capital, but it was up until 1872. So St. Anne today is one of the most historical parishes in the island, and tourism, like I mentioned earlier, is considered to be one of the biggest benefits to the parish. The harbor was eventually dredged out and the area was zoned for development in about the 1960s. So that is when the hotels and the tourism started coming in, and the marina was constructed to bring in the cruise ships at that point. So between 1989 and 1992, Ocho Rios received approximately 73% of the island's cruise ship passengers, which ultimately helped just the further development of that area. So as we know, as lovers of the Sandals brand, some of the island's best hotels and beaches are said to be found in the Ocho Rios area. And it's become globally recognized as one of the best places in the Caribbean to vacation. So if you are staying at one of the 3 Sandals properties in the Ocho Rios area, One of the main attractions is obviously Dunn's River Falls. I've been there. We'll talk about that in another episode. That has its own history as well. But when I was doing the research about this area, one thing that kept popping up was the Seville Heritage Park. So if you are looking to explore this area and some of the historical things that we've talked about today, this would be a really fantastic place to check out. It's a 300-acre park. It's owned by the Jamaica National Heritage Trust, and it's just 5 miles west of Ocho Rios. So it's got the historic Seville Estate, the Great House, which is the Plantation House, and the Heritage Park. You can go and visit. There's guided tours that are offered Monday through Friday from 9 to 5. You can walk around, and there is a huge artifact collection on display in the Great House, which showcases some things from the life of the Africans and the Europeans and the Arawaks, who we talked about today. And the park overlooks the Caribbean Sea. There's an old water wheel there that they used to operate the old sugar mill. The overseer's house is still there. There's so many things at this park that you could do and see that would really showcase some of the things that we talked about today in the history of Ocho Rios. So again, if you are looking for something to do in Ocho Rios off the resorts, I strongly encourage you to check out this park. I will put the link to it in my show notes, along with all of the sources I used for today's episode. So I hope you enjoyed that little history lesson about the Ocho Rios area. And the next time you go to one of the Sandals and Beaches resorts in that area, driving through, maybe you notice some of the things or signage or Spanish architecture, or go to the park, or maybe it's just some good conversation at the swim at bar and you can impress people with your knowledge of the area. Again, encourage everybody to book their trips back to Jamaica sometime in 2026, 2027. Please reach out if you have any questions about any of the properties. Again, I exclusively book Sandals and Beaches, and so I would like to think that I am very knowledgeable about these properties and would love to help you get there and see this beautiful area of Jamaica for yourself. Till next time, bye-bye.